Naples never really sleeps. It only slows down, like a wounded animal catching its breath. Rain slid down tiled rooftops and spilled into the narrow streets, turning the cobblestones slick with light. Vespas murmured in the distance, and the scent of the sea clung to the air. Salt, diesel, and espresso. Matteo De Luca watched it all from behind tinted glass. The back seat of his black Maserati felt like a confession box. Leather, silence, and ghosts. He had once believed in control, in the idea that power could silence pain. But power was just another addiction. It never really stopped the trembling inside him. "Boss!" Luca, his driver, looked at him through the rearview mirror. "You sure about this place?" Matteo's gaze shifted to the small cafe ahead, a humble corner shop with hand-painted letters that read Cafe Romano. He'd passed by it 100 times before, yet tonight something about the light, the way it glowed warm against the storm, pulled him in. "Yeah," Matteo said. "Park here." He stepped out into the drizzle, the rain whispering on his coat. Inside, the bell above the door chimed, a delicate sound, almost innocent. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and baked sugar. Tiny tables crowded the space, and a radio played a love song from another decade. Behind the counter stood a young woman tying her apron. Her dark hair twisted loosely, stray curls framing her face. Isabella Romano didn't look up right away. She was humming softly, stirring milk into a steel jug. When she finally turned, her eyes met his, hazel and unguarded, and the world for a second forgot how to breathe. "Buonasera," she said, her voice lilting. "Late night for coffee?" Matteo managed a faint smile. "Couldn't sleep." "Ah, then you've come to the right place. We keep Naples awake." She smiled, small, sincere, unaware that the man standing before her ran the very city she joked about. He ordered an espresso, no sugar. When she served it, he noticed her hands, steady, graceful, untouched by the kind of violence that marked his own. He took a sip. It was strong, bitter, honest, like the city itself. "Good?" she asked. "Too good," he said. "Makes me forget what time it is." She laughed lightly. "Then maybe that's not a bad thing." Hours later, Matteo found himself still sitting there, long after the rain stopped. He'd watched her clean tables, laugh with regulars, and hum when she thought no one was listening. It had been years since something human held his attention. His world was usually measured in transactions, loyalties, and death sentences whispered over wine. But tonight felt different. When he finally rose to leave, she called after him. "Same time tomorrow, signore?" He turned, a question flickering in his eyes. "Only if the coffee's as good," he said. "It's always good," she replied. He left a tip big enough to make her blink, and a piece of himself he hadn't realized was missing. Outside, Naples glittered beneath the streetlights. Luca opened the car door, studying his boss's rare expression, a softness that didn't belong to men like him. "Something wrong?" Luca asked. Matteo shook his head. "Something right, maybe." He glanced once more through the cafe window. Isabella was wiping the counter, her silhouette framed by the amber glow. For the first time in years, Matteo De Luca didn't feel like a king. He felt like a man who wanted to deserve a quiet life. The next morning, the De Luca estate sat on the hill like a fortress, marble columns, iron gates, and the constant hum of armed security. Inside, morning light spilled through tall windows, catching dust motes like tiny stars. Matteo's council waited in the dining hall, 3 men in tailored suits, their faces carved by time and violence. "Word is the Romano shipments moved through Port Santo last night," said Enzo, his consigliere. "They're cutting into our distribution lines again." Matteo stirred his coffee, silent. "You want me to handle it?" Enzo pressed. "No." One word, cold and final. The men exchanged puzzled looks. Matteo had never been one to hesitate. But last night still lived under his skin, the sound of Isabella's laugh, the warmth of that tiny cafe. Maybe, he thought, there was more to the Romano name than the blood on his brother's grave. Morning in Naples came soft and golden, washing the city's scars in light. Vendors shouted from narrow alleys, scooters cut through traffic, and church bells tolled like they always had. Reminders that life kept going, even when hearts forgot how. Matteo De Luca rarely had mornings free. But the night before had followed him into his dreams. A girl with tired eyes, a coffee cup, and a laugh that refused to leave him alone. By noon he was back in the car. Luca gave him a puzzled glance. "The cafe again, boss." Matteo only nodded. The world outside his window blurred. Pastel facades, laundry lines, children kicking a ball beside graffiti that read Nessanoi innocent. Nobody is innocent. When he entered Cafe Romano this time, Isabella was balancing a tray of pastries. A strand of hair had slipped loose, falling across her cheek. "You again," she teased. "You must really like our espresso." "Maybe it's the service," he replied. She grinned. "Then the service must charge more." He laughed, a real laugh, low and surprised, and she turned pink at the sound of it. They spoke between orders. Matteo learned she had studied art once, before her mother fell ill and she took over shifts to help with bills. She asked what he did for work. He paused, eyes flicking to the rain-specked window. "Import, export," he said finally. It wasn't a lie. Just not the whole truth. She nodded, satisfied. "Then you understand early mornings and late nights." "More late nights than I should," he admitted. That evening, as the cafe emptied, Matteo offered to walk her home. Her apartment was 3 blocks away, above a flower shop that smelled of lavender and dust. The streets were slick again, Naples breathing through the rain. "Thank you," she said, unlocking the door. "Most men don't bother." "I'm not most men." She met his gaze. There was something unreadable there, a tension that wasn't fear. "No," she said softly. "You're not." When the door closed, Matteo stood for a long time, listening to the sound of her footsteps fading upstairs. He didn't notice the black motorbike parked across the street, or the figure watching him from the shadows, a cigarette burning like a small warning. 2 nights later, Enzo burst into Matteo's office, rain dripping from his coat. "We have a problem," he said. Matteo looked up from the reports on his desk. "Which one?" "Someone's been tailing you near Via Santo. One of Carlo Romano's dogs." Matteo's hand stilled on the pen. "Romano," he repeated, tasting the name like old blood. "Yeah. I told the boys to scare him off. No one follows you without paying for the gas money." Matteo leaned back, eyes unfocused. A piece of the puzzle clicked somewhere he didn't want it to. Cafe Romano. The name he hadn't really thought about. The sign painted above the door. Romano. He rose slowly. "Leave it," he said. Enzo frowned. "Leave it. Boss, the Romanos." "I said leave it." When Enzo left, Matteo stood alone in the office, the city's lights blinking through the rain like warnings. He poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. For the first time he felt fear. Not of bullets or betrayal, but of what it would mean if the girl from the cafe carried the bloodline of his oldest enemy. A week passed. He told himself to stay away, but habit betrayed him. He returned every night, always finding her there. Sleeves rolled up, humming to the same love songs that had once been background noise but now sounded like confessions. They spoke of small things. The smell of rain, the chaos of tourists, her mother's favorite flowers. He never mentioned the gun hidden under his coat, or the men who followed him at a distance. One night, as thunder cracked over the bay, the lights flickered. She laughed nervously. "Naples and its storms," she said. "Always dramatic." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why I like it here." She poured him another espresso. "Then promise you'll keep coming back." He hesitated, then met her eyes. "You shouldn't make promises to men like me." "Maybe I already did," she whispered. Back in the car, Luca said nothing. But Matteo caught his glance in the mirror, worry mixed with loyalty. "Say it," Matteo muttered. "She's trouble, boss. Anyone can see it." "Maybe," Matteo said, watching the cafe vanish in the mirror. "But trouble makes me feel alive." At the Romano estate, far across town, a different storm brewed. Don Carlo Romano sat behind a mahogany desk, a cigar burning between his fingers. A man leaned close and whispered something. Carlo froze. "De Luca." "Yes, signore. He's been seen near the cafe. Several times." Carlo's jaw tightened. "My daughter works there." "Exactly, signore." The silence that followed was heavy. Carlo crushed the cigar into the ashtray. "Keep watching. If he comes near her again, I want to know." Night after night, Matteo and Isabella's connection deepened, laughter turning to glances to silence that said too much. But around them the city listened. Men with cameras, whispers in the dark, engines idling on side streets. And somewhere between love and danger, Naples held its breath. The next morning, Naples woke with its usual chaos, scooters cutting through narrow alleys, fishermen shouting at the port, church bells echoing from San Domenico. The city moved like it had a pulse, and Matteo Rossi felt every beat of it. He sat in the back seat of a black Maserati, the same car that once carried blood and secrets through these streets. Now it carried a man trying to forget. The driver, a loyal old friend, Gino, didn't speak. He knew Matteo was thinking, and when Matteo thought, it was best to let him. "Pull up by Caffè di Vento," Matteo finally said. His voice was smooth but heavy, like a cello string plucked in a dark room. Gino glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Again. Matteo's eyes didn't move from the window. Again. The cafe was small, hidden between a florist and a bookstore that had been there longer than both of them. Inside, the smell of roasted beans and vanilla filled the air, softening the sound of traffic outside. Isabella was behind the counter, her hair tied up, a stray curl brushing her cheek. She laughed with a customer. Not flirtatiously, just honestly. That kind of laughter was rare in Matteo's world. It was disarming. He pushed open the door. The bell above it chimed, and for a moment everything else dimmed. "Buongiorno," she said, that same warmth in her tone. He didn't smile. Not because he didn't want to, but because men like him didn't. "Espresso. Double." "Of course." She turned, her hands moving with a quiet grace. No tremble, no fear. She didn't know who he really was, and maybe that was why he kept coming back. When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed. Electricity, small but undeniable. "You always order the same," she said. "I like consistency. And yet, you look like someone who's never had a calm day in his life." He looked up at her. She'd seen him more clearly than most people who'd known him for years. "Maybe I'm trying to change that," he said softly. She smiled, not the polite kind. The kind that sees through you. "Then maybe start with a different drink next time." He left €100 note on the counter and walked out before she could protest. She sighed, shaking her head. The kind of man who paid too much and revealed too little. Outside, Matteo lit a cigarette. His hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, from the realization that he cared. That was dangerous. Caring got people killed in his world. That night, the city rained again. Naples always seemed to weep when Matteo thought too much. He stood by the window of his penthouse overlooking the harbor. Below, the lights shimmered across the black water. He poured himself whiskey, the good kind. Not for the taste but for the burn. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. He picked it up. "Boss," came Gino's voice, low and urgent. "You're not gonna believe this. The girl. The waitress, Isabella. I asked around." Matteo's chest tightened. "What about her?" Gino hesitated. "She's not just some cafe girl. She's Enzo De Luca's daughter." Matteo froze. The name felt like a knife twisting under his ribs. Enzo De Luca. His father's oldest rival. The man responsible for the ambush that killed Matteo's brother. The man he swore he'd destroy. Matteo set down the glass slowly. Whiskey spilled onto the table. Are you sure? He asked. Positive. Same bloodline. She lives under her mother's name. Probably doesn't even know. Matteo walked to the window again, the rain blurring his reflection. For years he'd lived with vengeance in his veins, and now love had found a way to poison it. He exhaled. No one touches her. Not a word. Not a move. Understood, said Gino. When the call ended, Matteo looked at the city again. A city that had taken everything from him and now dared to give him something he couldn't have. The next morning he went back to the cafe. Not as the boss. Not as the man of shadows. Just as a man who wanted to see her again. Morning, she said, wiping down a table. You were right, he replied. About what? I tried something new. He held up a small pastry. I almost choked. She laughed. Then maybe I should stick to making your coffee. Maybe you should. Their eyes held each other's longer than they should have. Then the doorbell rang and the moment broke. Two men in suits entered. Rough, loud, the kind who didn't come for coffee. Matteo's instincts sharpened instantly. He turned slightly, enough to watch them without being seen. They spoke to Isabella, pretending to ask for directions, but one of them slid a hand into his coat. Matteo's chair screeched as he stood. Is there a problem? He asked, voice calm but deadly. The men turned. Recognition flickered. Mr. Rossi, one said carefully. Outside, Matteo said. They obeyed. They always did. When the door closed behind them, Isabella looked pale. Who are you? She whispered. He looked at her, and for the first time he didn't know what to say. The air outside the cafe was thick with the smell of rain and smoke. The two men stood near an alley, their umbrellas barely shielding them from the drizzle. Matteo approached, slow, deliberate, like a wolf choosing which throat to bite first. Do you know what kind of mistake you just made? He asked. Boss, we were just... Before the man could finish, Matteo slammed him against the wall. You walked into her place. My place. Without my word. The other man tried to speak, but Matteo's glare silenced him. The only sound was the rain hitting cobblestone. I don't repeat warnings, Matteo said. You ever look in her direction again, and I'll make sure your family forgets what your face looked like. He released the man, who stumbled away, gasping for air. The other one followed, muttering apologies. Matteo watched them disappear into the mist. Then he turned toward the cafe again, the light from its window glowing like a fragile promise. Inside, Isabella was staring at him, her face pale but unreadable. He walked in quietly. The other customers were gone now. She stood behind the counter, wringing a cloth in her hands. I didn't mean to scare you, he said softly. You didn't scare me, she lied, voice trembling. Matteo almost smiled. You're a terrible liar. She hesitated. Who were those men? He leaned on the counter, eyes low. People who don't understand boundaries. She looked at him for a long time, then whispered, You're not just some businessman, are you? He didn't answer. Silence stretched between them, heavy, electric, dangerous. Do I need to be afraid of you? She asked finally. He stepped closer. Only if you ever lie to me. Her heartbeat quickened. She could feel it. And if I tell you the truth, then I'll protect you, he said, and meant it. That night, Matteo sat alone in his office, the lights of Naples burning outside like distant fires. A map lay spread across his desk. Territories, shipments, numbers, names. The De Luca family's name appeared again and again. He should have been planning revenge. But all he could see was her face, the way she said, Good morning, the way her hands shook when she thought no one was looking. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this. It was supposed to be clean. But this was war dressed like tenderness. A fire disguised as warmth. The door opened. Gino stepped in. We've got movement. De Luca's boys hit one of our warehouses near Porto di Napoli. Matteo's jaw tightened. Any losses? 1. Paulo. 2 others wounded. He inhaled slowly. The rage came quietly, like a slow tide. Send a message back. What kind? The kind they'll remember. Gino nodded, then hesitated. And the girl? Matteo looked up. What about her? She's connected, boss. Whether she knows it or not. If De Luca finds out. He won't, Matteo cut in. Not yet. Gino studied him. You're playing with fire. Matteo looked down at the map again. Maybe fire's the only thing that ever felt real. The next day, Isabella waited. She didn't know why. Something in her told her he would come, even though part of her wished he wouldn't. When Matteo finally entered, the cafe felt smaller, quieter, like even the air held its breath. He wasn't wearing a suit today. Just a black shirt, sleeves rolled up. He looked human, but she could sense the weight he carried. You didn't come yesterday, she said. Business, he replied. You wouldn't like the kind. I'm not sure I like any of this, she admitted. He leaned forward. Then tell me to stop coming. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. That's what I thought, he said quietly, almost to himself. He reached into his pocket and placed a small white lily on the counter. For you. She looked at it, then at him. You think flowers fix everything? No, he said. But they remind me that something pure can still grow out of the dirt. For a moment neither spoke. The rain outside softened, like even the weather wanted to listen. Then she whispered, You're dangerous, aren't you? He smiled faintly. Only when I have to be. Later that night, 2 men followed Isabella home. She didn't notice. The streets were dark, the lamps flickering, the sound of her heels echoing softly. But Matteo did. From the shadows across the street, he saw them, and the moment one reached for her purse, he was there. Happened fast. Flash of motion, a groan, a thud. One man hit the pavement. The other ran. Matteo didn't chase. Are you hurt? He asked her, breathing hard. She turned, eyes wide. How were you following me? Watching, he corrected. There's a difference. You shouldn't be here. I disagree. She stepped back, shaken. You can't protect me forever, whoever you are. Matteo looked at her. Rain dripping down his face, eyes cold but alive. Maybe I don't want forever. Maybe I just want tonight. Naples was quieter than usual that week. Too quiet. The docks where Matteo's trucks normally came and went now carried an unease that hung in the sea air. Gino said the fishermen were whispering that the De Lucas were moving again. Something about new guns, new blood. Matteo tried not to care. Every morning he still drove to the same small cafe. Every morning Isabella still smiled at him, as though the world outside those walls didn't have knives hidden under its coat. But the city always collects its debts. That evening a shipment went missing. 2 of Matteo's men were found in a burned-out van near the outskirts. The message was clear. Enzo De Luca was back in the game. Matteo stood in the warehouse, the smell of fuel thick in the air. His men waited for orders, tense, angry, scared. Find out who leaked the route, he said. His voice was calm, but the calm of a storm that hasn't broken yet. No one moves on De Luca until I say so. Gino frowned. You think the girl knows anything? Matteo's eyes snapped toward him. She knows nothing. Don't speak her name again unless you want to lose your tongue. The men nodded, silent. When they left, Matteo lit a cigarette, staring at the flames, chewing the wreckage. Love was supposed to make a man softer. Instead, it made him dangerous in new ways. The next day, Isabella noticed the bruise on his jaw. What happened? She asked quietly as she poured his coffee. Walked into a door, he said. She gave him a look that said she didn't believe a word. You're terrible at lying. He smirked. You've told me that before. They both laughed, but there was an edge under it now. Fear disguised as flirtation. He watched her wipe the counter, the sunlight catching her hair. He wanted to tell her the truth, to confess everything. Who he was, what he'd done, whose blood still marked his family name. But the words stayed buried. She knew she'd run. And if she ran, Enzo would find her. So he said nothing, and she kept serving coffee to a man she thought she might be falling for. Night fell again. Matteo drove through the old quarter, down roads that used to belong to him but now answered to no one. A black SUV followed De Luca's men. He could feel their eyes in the mirror. He parked beneath a crumbling viaduct, stepped out and waited. When the SUV stopped, 3 men climbed out, guns half hidden under their coats. "You shouldn't be here, Rossi," one said. "This is my city," Matteo replied. "Not anymore." The man raised his weapon. Matteo moved first, 2 shots fast, precise. The third man froze, then ran. Matteo didn't chase. He didn't need to. Naples would tell Enzo the story by morning. When it was over, he stood alone under the bridge. The rain started again, washing blood into the gutter. He thought of Isabella's hands, steady and warm. He wondered how much longer he could keep her safe in a world built on revenge. Back at the cafe the following morning, Isabella's laughter tried to fill the silence he brought with him. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "I didn't," he admitted. "Work." He hesitated. "Something like that." She leaned forward, studying him. "You're not the only one who hides things, you know." He raised an eyebrow. "No. My father," she said quietly. He wasn't the man people thought he was. He made enemies. Dangerous ones. Sometimes I think they're still out there. The cup in Matteo's hand froze midair. "What was his name?" he asked, almost a whisper. "Enzo," she said. "Enzo De Luca." The world tilted. For a moment, Matteo heard nothing but the roar of his own pulse. She looked at him, waiting for a reaction, but he only smiled, a small, hollow thing. "Then I guess we both come from bad stories," he said softly. She laughed, not knowing that her words had just broken open the past he'd tried to bury. For the first time in years, Matteo Rossi didn't know what move to make. He had faced guns, betrayals, even death, and never hesitated. But now, sitting in the quiet of his penthouse with her name echoing in his head, Isabella De Luca, he felt something close to fear. He poured whiskey, hands steady but heart in revolt. The city lights outside flickered over his face like ghosts. Naples never slept. It just waited for men like him to fall apart. He pulled out his phone. "Gino," he said, voice low. "Yeah, boss. Find out everything about her mother. Fast." Minutes later, Gino called back. "Mother's name is Sofia Marin. Used to be a singer. Left Enzo 20 years ago. No record of her being involved in any of his business. And the girl? Clean. Works that cafe, pays rent, no criminal ties. She's innocent, Matteo." Matteo hung up. Innocent. That word used to mean nothing to him, but now it meant everything. He looked out at the harbor again. The night was too quiet. He knew what came next. The De Lucas wouldn't let an insult like last night go unanswered. He grabbed his gun, slid it into his jacket, and went downstairs. The streets of Naples stretched dark and narrow. He drove alone, headlights cutting through mist. Near Via Toledo he saw it. A black van parked too perfectly at the corner. He stopped, waited. When the first bullet hit his windshield, Matteo was already moving. He ducked, rolled out of the car, fired twice. The van doors flew open. Muzzle flashes lit the alley like lightning. Matteo dove behind a stone wall, firing back with precision born of 1,000 nights like this. 2 of them went down fast. A third tried to run. Matteo's bullet caught him in the leg. He walked over, calm, controlled. "Who sent you?" The man coughed blood. "De Luca. He wants you gone before the meeting." "What meeting?" The man shook his head, fear and pain mixing in his eyes. Matteo pressed the gun to his chest. "What meeting?" "Tomorrow, the docs, the families." Matteo pulled the trigger. At dawn, the cafe felt like a confession booth. Isabella was already there, humming softly as she arranged the pastries. When Matteo walked in, she smiled, unaware that he had killed 3 men only hours before. "You again," she said, voice teasing. "You ever sleep?" He managed a faint smile. "Sleep's overrated." He sat watching her. Every small gesture, the way she brushed flour off her hands, the way her eyes lit up when she talked, felt like something stolen from a world he didn't belong to. She noticed the cut on his arm. "You're hurt." "Just a scratch." "That's not a scratch." She reached across the counter, gently touching his wrist. Her fingers were warm, soft, real. "You should let me clean it." He wanted to tell her to stay away, to run. Instead he said, "Okay." She led him to the back room, the smell of coffee giving way to soap and lemon oil. She dabbed at the wound with a cloth, close enough that he could feel her breath. "Who keeps doing this to you?" she asked quietly. He looked at her, searching for a lie that wouldn't sound hollow. "The past." She stopped, eyes meeting his. "Then maybe you should stop letting it find you." He didn't answer. He couldn't. Across the city, in a villa above the cliffs, Enzo De Luca sat surrounded by his men. His hair was silver now, but his eyes were still wolf-sharp. "So," he said, lighting a cigar, "Rossi thinks he can shoot my boys and walk free?" One of his captains leaned forward. "He's been quiet for years, boss. Maybe he doesn't want war." Enzo laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "There's no peace in Naples. Not for men like us. Rossi's blood still owes me." He blew smoke toward the open window. Below, the sea crashed against the rocks like applause. "And if he's found someone?" another asked. Enzo's expression darkened. "Then we take her first." That night, Isabella was closing the cafe when Matteo appeared again. He looked tired, dangerous, beautiful in the way storms are beautiful. "You shouldn't be here this late," she said softly. "I could say the same for you." She laughed, shaking her head. "You always talk like you're in some old movie." "Maybe I am," he said. "Just waiting to see how it ends." They stood close, too close. The tension between them hummed like a violin string about to snap. She reached up, touched his face. "Whatever you're running from, I don't care." He closed his eyes. "You should." And then, before he could stop himself, he kissed her. It was slow, desperate, the kind of kiss that doesn't ask permission because it already knows it's wrong. When it ended, she was trembling. "What are you so afraid of?" she whispered. "Everything," he said. "Especially you." The next morning, Naples woke to sirens and rain. A storm had rolled in from the sea, dragging thunder over the rooftops like an omen. Matteo never made it to the cafe that day. Gino stopped him at the garage before he could even reach his car. "There's word on the street, boss," Gino said. "De Luca knows." Matteo froze. "Knows what?" "That you're seeing someone. A waitress." For a moment Matteo didn't breathe. The air felt heavy, the kind of silence that lives before a gunshot. "Where did you hear this?" "From Luca's crew at the docks. Enzo sent men south last night. He's looking for her." Matteo grabbed his jacket. "Get the car." By the time he reached the cafe, the door was hanging open, the bell broken, chairs overturned. A coffee cup lay shattered near the counter, a smear of blood across the tiles. "Isabella!" he shouted. No answer, only the echo of his voice against the empty walls. He moved through the small rooms, gun drawn, heart hammering. In the back, a single white lily lay crushed on the floor. He knew immediately who had done it. Enzo De Luca. High above the sea, in the villa of marble and glass, Isabella sat bound to a chair. Her lip was bleeding. Her eyes were wild with confusion. Enzo stood before her, studying her like a relic of a past mistake. "So," he said quietly, "my little girl returns to me. Where is my mother?" she demanded. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted," he said. "What Rossi took from me, control." He crouched beside her, his tone almost tender. "Tell me, Isabella. When you looked into his eyes, did you ever see your brother there? The one he murdered?" She flinched. "That's not true." Enzo smiled thinly. Oh, it's true. Matteo Rossi killed him in the streets of Naples 20 years ago. And now he kisses his sister and calls it love. Her heart clenched. She didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. But Enzo's voice was steady, convincing in its poison. By morning, he said, Rossi will come for you. And when he does, he'll die where your brother did, by my hand. Night fell again. Matteo's car tore through the coastal road, headlights carving through mist. He could hear the sea smashing against the cliffs below. Boss, Gino said from the passenger seat, loading a rifle. You sure about this? De Luca's men are expecting you. I'm not here for war, Matteo said. I'm here for her. They reached the gate of the villa. 2 guards stood there, rifles in hand. Matteo didn't slow down. The Maserati crashed through the iron bars, the sound of shattering metal blending with thunder. The fight that followed was short and brutal. Matteo moved like a man with nothing left to lose. 2 shots, a knife, silence. By the time he reached the main hall, the floor was slick with rain and blood. Isabella, he called. Her voice came faintly from upstairs. Matteo. He ran toward it. A door burst open. Enzo stood there, gun raised, his face a mask of fury. You took everything from me, Enzo hissed. My son, my business, my name. And now you want my daughter? She's not yours to own, Matteo said. The shot came almost at the same time as the lightning. Enzo staggered, blood blooming across his chest, but he fired back before falling. The bullet grazed Matteo's shoulder, spinning him sideways. Isabella screamed. Matteo dropped the gun and caught her as she ran to him. It's over, he whispered. You're safe. She looked past him at her father's body. You killed him. Matteo's voice broke. He gave me no choice. She shook her head, tears falling. You always have a choice. For a long moment they stood there, rain spilling through the broken windows, the thunder fading into the sea. By dawn the villa was quiet. Enzo was dead. The De Luca men had fled. Matteo sat on the steps, bleeding and silent, while Isabella knelt beside him, bandaging his shoulder. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. You're the only thing I ever wanted to come for. She looked at him, her eyes filled with love and grief. What happens now? He gazed out at the horizon. Now we try to make peace out of what's left. Naples never forgot blood. It sank into the cobblestones, whispered through the markets, and rode the wind that carried the smell of the sea. A month had passed since Enzo's death. The city had grown quiet again, but the quiet was the kind that waits before another storm. Matteo Rossi sat by the window of a small safe house overlooking the Gulf. His arm was still bandaged, his shoulder stiff from the bullet wound. He watched fishermen cast their nets into the dawn, the sky pink and bruised. Behind him, Isabella was making coffee. The sound of it, the slow hiss of the pot, felt like a heartbeat in a world that had forgotten how to breathe. You should eat something, she said softly. He didn't turn. You still make it too sweet. She smiled faintly. You still drink it anyway. They shared the smallest of silences, the kind that lovers only earn after surviving death together. Later that morning, Gino arrived with bad news. Boss, he said, lowering his voice. They found Enzo's body. The police are calling it a Mafia war crime. They're after you. Matteo's jaw tightened. And the rest of the De Luca men. Some fled. Some want revenge. Word is, they're led by Enzo's nephew, Marcello. Matteo sighed. It never ends. Isabella stepped forward. Then we leave Naples. Tonight. You promised me peace, Matteo. He looked at her. I did. But his eyes told a different story. By evening their bags were ready. The plan was simple. Drive through Salerno by dawn, reach Bari, and from there take a ship to Greece. Clean start. But nothing in Matteo's life had ever been clean. As they reached the outskirts of the city, headlights appeared behind them. 3 black SUVs closing fast. Marcello, Matteo muttered. Gunfire erupted, tearing through the night. The car swerved, glass shattering. Isabella screamed as Matteo slammed the brakes, spinning the vehicle behind an old stone wall. "Stay down," he shouted, firing back. Bullets sparked against the car. The air smelled of smoke and salt. In that chaos, Matteo saw her, terrified but fierce, clutching his arm. "Go," he said. "Through the alley. There's a church at the end of the street. Wait for me there. I'm not leaving you." He kissed her, fast, desperate, final. "You promised me peace, remember? Let me buy it for you." Before she could answer, he stepped out into the street. Matteo walked into the rain like a ghost. His white shirt was soaked, his pistol steady. The DeLuca men came from both sides, shouting, firing. He moved through them like a storm. One shot. Three. Each one felt heavier than the last. By the time the last gun fell silent, only Matteo stood, bleeding, broken but alive. Then Marcello appeared, dragging his leg from a wound, gun trembling in his hand. "You killed my uncle," he spat. "I killed a monster," Matteo said. "You're one too." Marcello fired. The shot hit Matteo in the chest. He stumbled but stayed standing, looking at the younger man with tired eyes. "You think this ends with me?" Matteo whispered. "It ends with forgiveness." He raised his gun one last time, then dropped it. Marcello stared in confusion. Matteo smiled faintly, blood on his lips. "Go home. End the curse." Then he fell. At dawn, Isabella found him in the street. The rain had stopped. The city was waking. She fell to her knees beside him, shaking. "Matteo, please." He opened his eyes slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "You made me believe there could be light again. Don't go." He smiled, weak but peaceful. "Maybe this is what peace looks like for men like me." And then he was gone. Naples 1 year later. Cafe reopened. It was smaller now, quieter. A new sign hung above the door. "Cappuccino e pace. Coffee in peace." Isabella ran it herself. Every morning, she placed a single white lily by the window, the same kind Matteo had once brought her. Sometimes, fishermen swore they saw a man standing at the pier at dawn, watching the sea in silence, coat blowing in the wind. They said he never spoke, only smiled. And that was the story of a love that bloomed in blood and ended in peace. Even in a world built on vengeance, sometimes love is the only thing strong enough to rewrite destiny. If you felt Matteo and Isabella's story deep in your heart, tell me, what would you have done if you were in their place? Comment below and let me know where you're watching from. You're watching Mafia Hearts, where every story bleeds love and danger. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable tales.